Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
60% of people are going to like you. They're going to want to be friends with you. They're going to want to hang out with you. 30% of people are going to be indifferent. They're not really going to care. They're the types of people that you'll just see on the sidewalk. And then 10% of people are just not going to like you. No matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, they're just not going to like you. And so understanding that some people are just not going to like you really normalizes it for me of okay, well, it doesn't matter if everyone likes me because I have that support system. I have the people who I know that love me. I know that there's a lot of people out there who want to get to know me. That was really refreshing for me to learn and just consistently bring out for myself.
Hey friend, I'm so glad you're here. I'm Julie Lyles Carr with the AllMomDoes podcast, part of the Purposely Podcast Network. I love coming alongside you for the things you're wondering about, like how to do a better job with kiddos or how we get kids ready to be launched out into the real world. And that's why I was so excited when an email dropped in my inbox and I discovered a new friend. This is Sonia Suthar, and she is going to help us unpack some of the skills that, sometimes our teenagers are having a hard time with, and how she comes alongside and helps fill in that gap. Sonia, thanks so much for being with me today.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So tell the listener where in the world you are and a few facts about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm from Austin, Texas. I'm born and raised here, and I'm a student who is in college and also creating a business.
I love that. Very, very inspirational. And as I shared with you before we started recording, when I got your email, I was like, this is fantastic and a one of a kind. I haven't had someone your age reach out before and say, hey, I have some things that I think could help parents and teens in terms of communication. So I was just delighted when your email came across. So thank you so much for sending that.
Of course, I'm so glad.
So I want to hear a little bit about how you got into the line of work that you are currently doing, which is helping coach parents and students about public communication. Now, part of what I've noticed is that particularly, and this would fit within the age category that you're in, I have 8 kids and my youngest 3 were all in around the same ages and stages as the age you are when COVID hit. And one of the outcomes of that, Sonia, that was really interesting, they literally got nervous ordering at Starbucks through the drive-thru. They became very accustomed to only having to text or to only be in a class via a screen. Now, what's wild about this, Sonia, is my husband and I both, we are public communicators. We're public speakers. I'm a writer. It's not like these kids have not seen what it means to be communicating forward. But as I've worked also with some other people in my consulting business for their businesses, one of the things they're really struggling with is a generation of young people coming through college, coming into business arenas who are lacking, who don't know how to communicate in certain ways, in public ways, what professionalism looks like, how to have the confidence to speak up. So I would love to hear in your journey as someone who is a peer, an age peer to the needs that we're seeing in this group. What was it for you that you went, oh, wow, a lot of my friends, a lot of the people I'm engaging with, we've got a gap here. We've got some things that are missing. So tell me about that part of your journey.
Yeah, totally. So I started young with personal development. My parents were really into it of just having me read books and things like that, listening to tapes in the car. And I was really interested in understanding. I didn't really know what I was learning at the time, but as I started to get older, I could tell from a really young age that I was super shy and afraid of judgment. And then as I got older, my parents kept emphasizing that I go out, and they would be like, yeah, you're the one who has to order for the table. Or I would have to go and get salt if my family needed salt. So then I wasn't afraid. I was kind of breaking that barrier. And as I got older, it increasingly became clear to me that not only I struggled with learning these different life skills, but a lot of other kids do. And our education system right now doesn't teach us these things. It doesn't help with that development. And so that's what I really wanted to do with my business is we teach teens life skills that they don't really know intrinsically. And parents can't be the only ones who are teaching these life skills, right? And then also we provide them with a community, so it's not just teaching, but like you're having fun with people, a support system, and then having those like real world opportunities to really practice and try them. Because for me, my like development didn't really help. They didn't really like trigger those skills until I had to start using them. I had to start like going out into the real world and like talking to people and really advocating for myself. So that's kind of the development for me, how everything worked.
Why do you think that we've arrived at a place where we have a generation who's struggling in this way? I mean, I've teased some of my kids before where I'm like, it never would have dawned on me to have pulled up to a drive-through and then said to my mom, I can't do it, you do it, you know? And so we've worked through it at my house and we're in a much better spot now. But I was fascinated and curious as to how we landed here. What are your thoughts on why we have a generation who's struggling at this level?
Yeah, I think you touched on it really well at the beginning of like it's also easier to just like be able to send that text or order online, and so you don't have to deal with like misinterpretations. Like I know like when I was at that stage, I was worried that they just wouldn't hear what I was saying and I wasn't clear enough. And then I would have to like repeat myself over and over again. And that kind of also stemmed back from the fear of like having to repeat myself in front of my parents if they were on their phones and they weren't listening to me. And I think that a lot of kids are afraid of judgment, rejection, and that kind of goes into like, oh, if you have to repeat yourself, then maybe you're not like good enough as you are speaking, and so you have to improve. And we haven't really had this like feedback loop in this day and age where it's like, okay, like you do something wrong and now you get to improve upon it. It's like we're very much so coddled right now. And it's like you can text, you can do something online, and then you don't have to deal with any repercussions or consequences. And so you don't really learn from that. And that's why it was really good to just like get out and get that feedback loop and get like the learning from that.
There is something about that real world experience that the only way you can get it is through a certain level of discomfort. But Sonia, I see a lot of parents who, in wanting to accommodate and to validate how their kids may be feeling, often then feel a little bit hampered in terms of pushing and saying, you got to do this. We are told that we have kids who are experiencing anxiety in levels that we haven't necessarily seen before. We've done a better job, I think, as a generation of parents to begin to understand and name and pull out the nuances of a lot of different emotions and the somatic ways that those emotions can impact. But at the same time, there is a little bit of a disempowering to parents because you can feel like, well, if I push my kid, am I overlooking how they're feeling? Am I putting my agenda on them in a way that's not fair or might make them even more resistant? I'm really curious to hear your opinion as someone who's now 19, who has come through this, who saw this need for personal development. And how do you inform parents, hey, here's how, yes, you can validate who your kid is, what their personality is, the various levels of shyness or more gregariousness they may have. But at the same time, how do we, as a parent, how do we create a standard of, at the very least, you want to make sure that your child is going to be able to do X, Y, and Z when they head into the real world? How do you convey that to parents in a way that is both honoring of how their kids are wired, but at the same time says, well, let's get realistic about what it means to be launched and to have an independent life?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And this goes back to a book that I read called 10 to 25 by David Yeager. And he really emphasizes that the best way to mentor someone, and that's what parents are doing, they're right, they're guiding someone. They're not just telling you what to do. It's not an authoritarian regime, but it's like, I want to help guide you so then you have the autonomy to be able to make these decisions on yourself. And the way that he shows is he says high support and high standards, right? You have to say that you're always there for them, you're holding space, and holding space is just like presence. You're there with them, you're not on your phone, and you're just here. Even if you guys aren't talking, you're just holding space. And I bet you guys can like recall like a time where you're just like with your friend and you guys are both like staring at the stars or like on the window in a car ride, and you guys are just like connected but you're not talking about anything. And that's what I mean by holding space. And from there, you want to have high standards. You want to tell them that, like, you like ask them questions of like, where do you want to be? Where do you want to go? And from there, you're not telling them what to do, but you're helping them achieve their goals by giving that support, but also having that standard of like, you're going to try, you're going to do it. I mean, there's also a difference between like medically diagnosed anxiety and also the anxiety that we have in this generation. And I would say that I definitely have anxiety and like I'm afraid of certain things and going out and putting myself on the line, but by doing it over and over again and not letting myself overthink it, it really diminishes the anxiety, and it also like creates that courage and discipline to do it. So like by having those high standards of like you're going to do it, and then if you fail, I'm going to help support you. I'm going to talk you through it. Like you're always unconditionally loved with me, and that's what parents really want to communicate. But it's kind of hard for them to communicate and show it with healthy actions, right? Not actions that are trapping the kid.
You think that you are in the final round of getting all this parenting done. You've got kids who are in high school, you're starting to think about college, and you're thinking, this is it. I'm Julie Lyles Carr. I'm a podcaster and I'm a mom of 8. And here's what I want you to know about George Fox University. It's a different way of doing college. Why? Because yes, it's all about getting a fantastic degree to set your kid up for their future. They have 60 undergrad programs available at George Fox University. But that's not where the story ends. It's also about equipping them spiritually. If you get out of college with a degree, but you don't have a closer relationship with God, that obviously is going to deeply impact what your young adult life looks like. So for your kiddos, I want you to consider, what would it mean for your child to be able to go to George Fox University, where 93% of George Fox students say they now have a closer relationship with Jesus? George Fox University is located in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon. They have 23 Division III athletic programs, and 100% of students at George Fox University receive financial aid. George Fox University is dedicated to their promise. They want every student to be known for who God created them to be. So listen, parents, yeah, you are getting into some of those final laps, but you definitely want to make these last laps count in a big way when it comes to the legacy of your parenting. So be sure and check out for your student, georgefox.edu. That's georgefox.edu. I think that part of what you tease out, which is really important, is the power of what sometimes we've classically called immersion therapy, that sometimes the only way to learn the thing is to do the thing. I was recently conversing with someone who's been doing a lot of work around the idea of what our kids need to be equipped with when they launch from our homes. And she has like a spreadsheet, a list of the various things that come through, because part of what we've been realizing is that we have kids who academically are qualifying to go to Ivy League schools like Harvard, like Yale. And yet those schools are now offering courses that are requirements about just basic skills for people to have in order to be able to truly utilize and engage in their university experience. Some of those things are practical, like learning how to do laundry and learning how to make a dental appointment. Some of those things have to do with communication, in breaking off and saying, hey, you really do need to be able to engage, to make phone calls, to set appointments, to be able to talk with your professor about something you're concerned about or advocate for yourself with a grade. And no, you can't call your mom to do it. What are you seeing on the landscape when it comes to this generation heading into things like college, into jobs? It's something we call soft skills a lot, right? And yet we now know that, man, those soft skills are going to be even more important in an age of AI, because those soft skills are the things that humans can do that machines cannot. So what are you seeing when it comes to the expectations at the university level in those internship positions? What are employers saying? What are college professors and academics saying that they want to see in young people today when they enter those seasons?
I think a really big thing is agency, of being able to advocate for yourself, like you said, being proactive and knowing, like, this kind of goes back to emotional intelligence of like knowing who you are, knowing what your identity is, being able to self-regulate, and then figuring out what you need so then you can ask for help. And there it comes back to also reframing, right? Asking for help isn't a weak thing, but it's a really strong thing, because then you can grow faster if you're taking inspiration and advice from mentors who've already done it. So it's like building that agency, being proactive, and then also having that emotional intelligence, which a lot of people don't have because they haven't been aware of what that is. Like their parents maybe had built it in themselves and they thought that they were subconsciously building it, but they weren't actually consciously saying, like, to be emotionally intelligent, you need to be able to understand your feelings. You need to be able to regulate them. And then you need to be able to move past them or let them go. And a lot of kids nowadays just have these really big emotions that they don't really understand and they can't manage because they've never done that before. And so I think that's definitely a big thing as well.
I do think you're right that in trying to be more empathetic and more educated with our kids' emotions, one of the things we've inadvertently done as a generation of parents is we've put ourselves in the position of being the emotional regulators. The kid gets to feel the feeling, and we're the one who is trying to mitigate and calm, but not necessarily teaching that they are going to have to be responsible ultimately for the way they feel and ultimately how they process those emotions. And when anxiety comes along, particularly when it comes along in terms of having to communicate outside of yourself, having to communicate with an employer, having to communicate with a teacher, that really can feel incredibly overwhelming. I have to wonder too, though, because I saw it within the age range of my own kids, the ages that my youngest kids were when COVID hit and everything shut down. And the only people that they really were having much to do with face to face was just immediate family. What role do you think that played with the generation of young people that you are seeking to help today? Do you think we've overemphasized the impact of that, underemphasized? Are we at a place yet where we can actually do a debrief on what all of that might have actually meant in terms of social development, processing anxiety, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I mean, for me, I feel like we didn't necessarily over or under. I think we just didn't fully understand it. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
that anyone's fully reflected upon it. And there definitely is some people, but I know that I haven't. And like the effects for me. And then also, like, depending on your like parents' jobs and stuff, like maybe they were very stressed at that moment in time too, because COVID did like change up the job layout as well. Like I know that my parents were stressed about that specifically, but also it made me very like close to my family, but also very like controlled and like caged in by my family, not intentionally, but it was like those were the like main people that you hung out with 24/7. And so I definitely think that for me, anxiety increased in the outside world because you didn't really know really what was going on in other people's minds, and you also knew that you're fully accepted with your family, that like not being fully accepted by everyone else is a scary thing. You're like, well, I feel like I have to, because like for the last how many months or so, like I was fully accepted in this specific environment. And then also with like the COVID, it also contributed to the rise of like being on social media, right? And everyone was like obsessed and like looking at it, looking at the comments. And so you wanted to be cool in that way of like, oh yeah, I thought that way, or like I'm in the known, or I know what like everything is going on. And so I know for me specifically, like I wanted to make sure that I knew everything that was happening in pop culture, so I felt like I was in the in crowd. And that, like, really showed up unhealthily for a while because I would just be on social media, but when you, like, get off social media, you realize that there's a couple effects of, like, your attention span shorter, you're not, like, as interested in things, your dopamine is really, really rough now because you're just, like, constantly stimulated by unhealthy dopamine of short real form videos that, like, being in the outside world and, like, staring at the stars is just, like, bonkers. Like, why would you do that? It's just not fun. And so I think that those are really big things, and also just, like, from what I've seen, judgment and fear of rejection are definitely the number one things in students and teenagers.
Yeah. I mean, and so many of us, even as we get into older adult stages and phases, I mean, I just don't really know a person who just truly loves rejection and feeling judged by others, feeling excluded by others. And yet at the same time, there is a resilience that comes when you have to face it. And if you are constantly creating buffers around ever having to experience it, you're not going to build up any endurance or tolerance to it. It's kind of like a little bit of snake victim, a little bit of a snake bite versus actually having to process it and not get it all in one big wallop. There's a big difference between those two things, using it in a medical way and in a way in which it really has long-term effects that are negative. I do wonder too, I haven't seen anything yet on this, but I know that there's been conversation that a couple of developmental stages were likely the most impacted when it came to being in shutdown 6 years ago, which was children who were born during that time and didn't have social interaction as they started into their toddler years with other children of the same age. And I wonder if we will look back and say, yeah, the kids who were 12, 13, 14, like that's part of what happened there. They didn't get some of that needed exposure. And yeah, that includes some rejection and some things that aren't terribly fun. And yet those are the very anti-venom built out of venom, if you will, that they sometimes need. Talk to me about what you tell parents and teenagers is sort of the baseline that they need for a successful launch. What are just some of the, because I think the expectation that you're going to, if you've got a teenager who is afraid to order at Starbucks and all of a sudden you want them to be able to deliver a 15-minute public talk in front of a room of 200 people, that jump might feel massive. But for the student who's really hesitant about picking up the phone and making the phone call to make an appointment or to ask a question, for the student who is really struggling even at the Starbucks drive-through, what's a good baseline for parents and students to say, okay, if we can get to here as you are getting ready to launch into college or launch into the first job, this subset would serve you well and then can be scaffolded off of for other big things. But what's the baseline that you want to help achieve for parents and students?
Yeah, I think it goes into the beliefs that the students have of like, oh, well, if I do this and I get the wrong response, then I'm not loved or I'm not enough. And so, like, the basic thing would probably be to isolate. What is that belief that is holding them back from doing these things? And, like, for me, it was like, oh, well, if I'm rejected, then I'm not good enough. And so, by you having that understanding as a teen and also the parents having that understanding, then they can really build that awareness. So then you can do different things, little things that help you prove totally opposite of like self-love, like encouraging self-love, having a self-love exercise that like really shows that you are enough in itself. And like the parents really emphasizing that like I love you unconditionally no matter what. And so it's like those little things of like, okay, well, why are you afraid? What is that belief that's holding you back? And then trying to reframe that belief. But it really goes into understanding and then creating a new one. But you have to really understand that like from that belief there was a purpose for it. And you have to love that fact that like my body, like my subconscious is trying to protect me in that way. And that's why that belief came. It's not because you're broken or you need to be fixed, but it's because there's a purpose to it. And then also something that I talked about in my last workshop that really hit really hard with the kids is you're always going to be judged. And this is something that I have to tell myself too, of like, you're always going to be judged. And there's some people who are just not going to like you. And there's this rule that I brought up, which is the 60-30-10 rule. 60% of people are going to like you. They're going to want to be friends with you. They're going to want to hang out with you. 30% of people are going to be indifferent. They're not really going to care. They're the types of people that you'll just like see on the sidewalk. They'll smile. They're like no hate towards you. And then 10% of people are just not going to like you. No matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, they're just not going to like you. And so like understanding that some people are just not going to like you and some people are going to be indifferent really normalizes it for me of like, okay, well, it doesn't matter if everyone likes me because I have that support system. I have the people who I know that love me. I know that there's a lot of people out there who want to get to know me. And then I know that there's some people out there, that 40% who doesn't really care or doesn't want to get to know me. And so that was really refreshing for me to learn and just like consistently bring up for myself.
What I love that you're bringing out here is I think sometimes we think this gap in communication with young people has to do with them not having the skill set of knowing how to talk, how to make small talk in a networking event, how to present their paper in a class. And yet what I hear you saying is, well, But before we get into all of that, let's back up a little bit. There's a base fear happening, which is any kind of communication that's out there outside of this little comfort zone I've created around myself is prime real estate to get rejected, judged, hurt, shut out of the group. And wow, in our nervous systems, when we equate it that way, and when we maybe have had well-intentioned adults around us who, in trying to protect our feelings, have reinforced that boundary and bubble and have said, okay, then we're not going to make you do XYZ. That fear of rejection is so huge. I think there's such wisdom in saying, okay, yeah, that's what we have to figure out first. A lot of the skills that we can put on top of that later can be learned, but how much healthier would all of us be if we learned first beyond the skill set, if we learned first what you're talking about, which is, yeah, what you communicate is not going to be for everybody. Yeah, what you communicate will mean that there are going to be some people in your world who are going to sideline you. But when you know who you are, when you know who you're speaking to, when you enjoy the percentage of people who really want to hear what you have to say, who want to be around you, then that helps mitigate that certain percentage, and it's a guaranteed percentage of some sort, who aren't going to want to be along for the ride. I think that's an incredibly insightful place to start rather than just throwing somebody full on into the skill sets that you think that people are going to need. I'd love to hear from you what you're teaching, what you're seeing and the trends now. I know that it's been interesting for me. I have a wide age range of clients in my content work. And one of the things I'm seeing in terms of communication that's quite fascinating is I have a certain group of clients that everything runs through email and we pick up the phone and we talk to each other. And I have a certain set of clients that it's practically all through texting, which then interestingly, with the younger set of clients who it's primarily through texting, they actually aren't as adept sometimes with email platforms, with apps and technologies that are pretty standardized when it comes to running business, for contracts and things of that nature, because they're more accustomed, they're more sophisticated technologically in terms of a certain set of things online and certain things when it comes to iPhone or devices or iPad. But when it comes to some basic business communication etiquette, they're lagging. What are you working with parents and students to help both honor where we're going technologically when it comes to communication, but at the same time realizing that we've kind of got a multi-generational thing and being able to code switch back and forth to how people prefer to be communicated with, but at the same time hold some kind of professional standard. What are you seeing in that world? How are you helping parents and kids understand each other and the need for flexibility, but at the same time, the need for a certain level of mastery? What does all that look like? Because that's another component of effective communication.
Yeah, totally. And I think that kind of also goes into the generational gap, right? Because there's some parents who struggle to connect with their kids because we're generations apart. And so it's also not just younger people using different platforms and older people, but it's also kids are trying to connect with their parents and parents are trying to connect with their kids, but it's not in the way that when they were young, they would have wanted to connect with their kids, right? And so it's totally different. And I'm not doing anything directly to help the actual gap of those hard skills of understanding both business skills, but it's more so the emotional intelligence of why does this seem hard? And how can you change your communication style to speak to the younger generation versus the older generation? So something big also in 10 to 25 is younger people from that age range want status and respect. And I don't think that's just for that age range. I do think that a lot of older people also want status and respect.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so understanding that if this is what people want and you're communicating to them in an unhealthier way that they don't get what they want, or you're hitting straight to their identity of being mean in that way, or unintentionally just saying comments that go straight to the identity that they really want to keep, then you can understand this is why they reacted differently. And so really reflecting of okay, I communicated in this way and this is why it didn't work so well, or this is why it did work so well. And this is something where I talked about ghosting in my last workshop of why do some kids ghost? Why do people ghost in general? And it's not probably just because they don't think you're cool enough, but it's probably because they're trying to protect themselves from rejection, or they're just like they don't know what to say, or things like that. And so there's more to the story than just they don't like you or you're not good enough. And most of the time, it's not about you, but it is about the other person.
I think that's important to remember because as we are all onboarding a variety of generations, a wide span. I mean, when I look at today's workplace, you literally can have a 50 to 60 year difference sometimes because people are retiring later, people are staying engaged, which is exciting when you realize that, hey, we're doing a better job, hopefully, releasing some ageism in businesses, in what people are able to produce and the kind of work that they love to do. And as younger people are coming into that workflow, and as younger people and other generations are beginning to have more intermingling, I do love the idea of thinking first, hey, sometimes if somebody isn't responding to the email or isn't responding to the text or whatever the thing is, it may have more to do with some internal things they're dealing with. It may have to do with technologies that they don't want to mess up. They want to engage with you, but this is the technology that they know. And to have having some grace for each other in that it's not necessarily a statement about one generation against another generation. It may just have more to do with people wanting to show up as their best and sometimes feeling some hesitation when they're unsure about tech platforms or the best way to communicate or the best way to engage a different generation. I love that insight. Now, you got to have yourself a little TED Talk. I was so impressed that you got to speak, that you have a TEDx. Tell me about the process of getting to do that. What was that like? That's such an amazing thing that you got to do.
Yeah, so back in high school, I was doing my business, and one of the hardest things in a business, especially at a young age, is credibility, right? Especially with parents of like, well, why would I trust you with my kid? And that's a totally valid question. And so the best way that I thought about doing it, and one of my mentors told me, was like, you should get on a TEDx. And at the same time, my school, Alpha, is a very like public marketed school, and they were offering a TEDx. They were gonna host it, and so they issued the application for like everyone, like all the students, but also like anybody who was interested. And I decided to apply. I was very like excited because public speaking's been something that I've been pretty excited about after like getting over the whole shyness factor. And so I applied and I got in. And so that's kind of how it worked of like the applying wasn't the hard part for me, but it was more so like drafting the talk. And then once I did the talk on stage, it was probably the most empowering feeling that I've ever had. It was really fun, and I felt like I really made a difference and served all the parents in the audience, and that was my biggest goal of just like helping others.
Well, I am so thrilled for you. Anytime I see a young woman be able to engage in public communication, particularly on a platform that has such credibility, I'm just cheering. I was so thrilled to see that. And I think in that story and how you were able to arrive at that opportunity is something else that I think parents are trying to understand and help their kids move into, which is initiation. There is that fear of rejection, obviously, within a variety of communication platforms, whether that's interpersonal or when it comes to engaging with the boss or whoever. But there's also that slowdown, it feels like, in some ways, of initiation in the younger generation. And I can certainly understand how it can be attached to that fear of rejection that we've been talking about, that fear of being judged. But how would you help parents and kids really understand the importance of initiation and engage in it in a way where it's not parents shoving their kids into initiation, but also helping kids understand that there are things that they're going to have to engage for themselves. They're going to, if it's important to them, they're going to have to initiate, that there's not going to be somebody who magically comes along necessarily and discovers them. I mean, sometimes it happens, and when it does, that's great. But for most people, there's going to have to be that moment, that spark of initiation. How do you unpack that with parents and kids in your workshops?
Yeah, so I think for that specifically, it would be like, well, whatever they have to initiate and like make that first step, break it down. Break it down into smaller bite-sized goals so it seems easier. And then also, if the teen is like scared or nervous about one specific step, like reframe what it means. So it's like, oh, I have to DM my favorite person on Instagram. And if they reject me, then I feel like they don't care about me. And then you can reframe it of like, no, like this is your first step. You have to like get rejected, and eventually after you get rejected a couple times, then you'll get the yes. So it's like breaking it up into bite-sized things so they have clarity. Clarity is really key because then they know what to do next. But then also reframing those scary parts of like it's not rejection and failure. Like reframing failure for me was really valuable of like you don't fail. Failure to me doesn't mean like you did something bad or it didn't work out. Failure to me is that I failed to learn from it. I failed to learn from the experience. It's like even if like I didn't do well in a test, it's not like failure. It's the fact that I need to learn from it, and if I don't learn from it and I just like shove it down in my backpack, that's more so failure to me. And so it's like reframing those little things so it doesn't seem as challenging, right? It's the words in your mind that make it a lot harder than it actually is.
I love that. Well, I'm so excited for you for your company, which is called Cloud9. And it's such an inspirational story of how you have seen this gap and you want to do things to try to make things better. So where can the listener go to learn more about you, about the work you're doing, find the TED Talk, all the things? Where can they go?
Yes, so cloud9go.com is my website, and it should have all the information on there.
All right. Fantastic. Well, Sonia, again, I can't thank you enough for reaching out, for sending that email, for connecting so that we could have this great conversation. And again, you are a one of a kind. You are the first of your generation who's reached out to me and has said, hey, I have some stuff that I think can help your audience, parents and kids, do a better job connecting, communicating, and being prepared for the future. So thank you so much for your time today.
Of course, thank you.
All right, friend, you know what to do. We've got show notes for you because Rebecca puts those together and she's going to have all the links to the things that Sonia and I have talked about today. I love it too. When you go to Instagram, you can find me there at Julie Lyles Carr, all the places, and go into my DMs. Tell me what you are thinking about, what you're wondering about, what guests you want to have. I love it when you do that. Be sure and check out AllMomDoes.com, AllMomDoes on the socials, because that is a fantastic community for you, for women who walk alongside you, for what you're learning spiritually, how it's going in your marriage, what's going on with the kids and the job, all the things. That community exists for you. And I'll see you next time here on the AllMomDoes podcast.